In this last video on getting started in Camera Raw, we're going to have a look at the full version of Photoshop and its Camera Raw editor, because it's got a few more tools and tricks up its sleeve compared to the cheaper cut down Elements Raw editor. And you can see there's many more tabs here, for example, with lots of tools and tricks, and we've got some more tools in the toolbar at the top. So I'll show you some of the key differences between the cheap Elements Raw editor and the more expensive CS5 version. To save time, I'm not going to go over the same tools we looked at in our first movie, but we will have a look at new unique tools like Color Sample. Now all the images you've got are made up of three channels, red, green and blue, and all the colours are made up of a different mixture of values in those channels. So if you click here on the genes, you can see we've got red 38, green 51 and blue 63. You can also click and add samples for skin, and you can discover the colours that make up those particular areas. That's not particularly useful for photo editors, so I'm going to click Clear Samplers. At least we know it's there. A more useful tool is this one. We're going to look at that in just a tick. Targeted adjustments, very powerful indeed. But before that, I just want to grab the zoom tool and click to zoom in. And if you've got things like unwanted spots, you can actually get rid of those using this tool here, which is called the Spot Removal Brush. So to remove the spot, all you do is you just click and drag to draw a little red circle over the unwanted spot and let go, and Photoshop will then sample an area of clean skin. You can move that around if it doesn't quite work. Let's click again and we'll choose that blemish there and replace it with this bit of clean skin. If these little overlay circles get in the way, you can always hide them by clicking here, and you can see that they're still doing their job. So we can get rid of spots without having to leave the comfort and quality zone of the Camera Raw editor. Now the next tool I'm going to show you is arguably the most powerful and most useful tool in CS5's Raw editor, and it is this chap here. It's the adjustment brush. So if you click there, you get an adjustment brush pane, and you can adjust various properties like saturation or sharpness or color depending on the one you want to select. But let's say we wanted to increase the exposure of specific areas like the hair, for example, without changing the image as a whole. You can bump up exposure and then use a brush tip to click and spray, and you can see it's lightening the hair a little bit like so. So that's a targeted adjustment. It's like dodging and burning, making things lighter or darker just by spraying on them. If you're using Elements, you have to do that in the standard Photoshop editor and you lose the raw quality of the file. But here we can dodge and burn, lighten or darken in the Camera Raw editor thanks to this amazing tool. If we click down the bottom, we can choose Fit in View and then have a look at another way to make selective adjustments using the graduated filter. When you click here, you see a new selection of options. We can actually darken the top of the shot, for example, by changing exposure, and then click and drag and you get a gradient effect like so. So that's a cool way of darkening skies, for example. By pressing the Alt key down and clicking Reset, you can get rid of all of those adjustments, and we go back to the shot as it was when we first opened it, though it has still got rid of all the spots using this tool here. But if we want to change tones in a different way, go to the Zoom tool to get all the tabs back up, click on Tone Curve, and you can now target individual tones and adjust them using the powerful Curves tool. For example, if we click on Point, we can change the contrast to Strong Contrast, and that adjusts the curve to darken the shadows and lighten the highlights. Alternatively, you can go to Parametric and you can target specific tones like shadows and darken those or lighten them depending on the needs of the shot. Here's a really cool tab. It's the HSL Grayscale tab, and you can create powerful monochrome versions of your shot. If you click Convert to Grayscale, we get a rather drab black and white version, but we can actually adjust these sliders to lighten or darken specific tones depending on the colour. Take those jeans, for example. We can go to blues and drag to the left, and you can see they're much darker, or drag to the right to lighten them. Now, you might not remember what colours are where, so you can grab this tool, the Targeted Adjustment tool, and then you can click in, say, Skin Tones, and drag to the right to lighten that sampled area, and you can see the oranges slider now is sliding automatically to the right. If we click on the jeans and drag to the left, it's darkening the blues and making a nice contrast between her jeans and her skin. And you could also target the hair as well and tweak that by clicking and dragging to create a nice contrast range. If you want to add a wash of colour to your shot, you can pop up to here, which is the Split Toning tab, pop up saturation to maybe around about 15, and you can see the shadows and the highlights now have got a little wash of colour, and we can take that down and give it a nice cool blue and do the same with the shadows as well. Or you can do cross-processed effects by changing the hue in the highlights and having a different one for the shadows. So that's a nice way of adding a little bit of colour to your monochrome shot. And as a finishing touch to our photo, we can actually go to lens correction and add a creative lens vignette just to darken these shadows in the corner in a fashionable way. And to do that, you can just click and drag, and that is darkening those corners. And that's a very typical process to add to fashion photos. This is designed to remove vignetting. If the photograph's too light or dark in the corners, you can actually fix that, but you can also use it in a creative way like so. Now, in our first Getting Started in Camera Raw tutorial, we looked at changing the bit depth by clicking down at the bottom of the Elements Camera Raw editor, and you can do a similar thing in Photoshop CS as well. You can change bits per channel to 16 here, and you can also change the resolution. Now, by boosting that from 240 to 300 pixels per inch, you add even more information to the photograph, so you'll get a better quality print. So it's worth popping that up to 300, clicking OK, and we can then open the image in Photoshop Standard Editor, ready to print it by clicking here. And when you open that up, you'll see it appear in the Standard Editor. It's quite a large file, so it might take a few seconds to open up. So here's the finished photo in the Standard Photoshop Editor. Now, we were able to make all the changes here in the Camera Raw editor, so the quality is going to be excellent. If we were using Elements, we wouldn't be able to do the monochrome changes or the split toning or the vignetting using the Camera Raw editor there, so the quality wouldn't be quite as good. So that's one of the advantages in editing in CS5's Camera Raw editor. You can stay in the Raw editor for much longer than you can if you're using Elements.